Gemma. I'm a senior publisher at Oxford University Press, and I've been heading up the programme committee alongside Deborah Dixon for this conference for the next couple of days, and we're really delighted to welcome you here. Oxford's a beautiful city, so I hope you get a chance to come and explore it after the conference and after you've had a chance to enjoy the next 2 days' worth of sessions. This year's conference is going to focus on the theme of transitions in academic publishing. It looks at the opportunities and challenges offered by AI, the continued journey towards open access publishing, and the dilemma that publishers face in terms of collaborating versus competing in the ever-changing landscape. We're looking forward to some really fascinating discussions, and I encourage you to make use of the Q&A app that's part of the attendee hub, and you should have had an email to say how to access that as part of your welcome. We will also be taking questions from the floor throughout. After lunch today, we have the open forum session where Chris, Roger Jackson and Jennifer Wright will lead an open discussion on the topics covered in the morning sessions. So please get thinking of any questions that you might want to ask or experiences that you might want to share with the group as you go through the morning, because that session is there to have the discussion later on. We really want to make sure that everybody feels welcome, so if you see anyone on their own, please go and introduce yourself and have a chat. Just to remind you of the ALPS Code of Conduct, we ask that you treat everybody kindly and with respect. So I want to say a few really big thank yous. The first goes to the Conference Programme Committee for creating this excellent programme. It looks really exciting, and as I said, we're looking forward to the next couple of days. I want to say a huge thank you to the session chairs and all of our speakers, because we couldn't have done it without them, as well as Susie and the ALPS team, because they really have pulled this all together for us. So a big thank you to them. I also want to say thank you to the many sponsors who've supported us and without whom this event couldn't have gone ahead. It is really fantastic to have the support. So PLS is sponsoring the Platinum and Rising Stars Award. Virtue Sales have sponsored the Gold sponsorship. The drinks reception is sponsored by the Association of University Presses, and the silver sponsors are CPI and MDPI. As you'll have noticed, hopefully when you've been getting your tea and coffee this morning, we also have the Association of University Presses again. For those of you who don't know, this is a community of over 160 non-profit publishing institutions who are committed to the highest calibre of research-based scholarship. So there is a book stand at the front. So again, once you, in the breaks, feel free to browse the stand area, but please don't take the books, because the books and all the stand are going off to Manchester afterwards, so they're for browsing, but please don't take them with you. I also wanted to flag that we really appreciate your feedback. So at the end of these 2 days, if you could take some time to let us know how you found the conference and to let us know your thoughts, it really helps us plan future events. So finally, I'm just going to run through some quick housekeeping. So all of the sessions are going to take place in here, L2 or in L3. The coffee and lunch is going to be served in the south mezzanine, so that's the bit that you've just come from. A reminder to please be careful of UK and EU competition law throughout this conference, and try and refrain from engaging in any discussions or activity that could be construed as anti-competitive. You should take care not to share, either as part of the panel discussions or during any informal settings, any commercially sensitive information about your organisation or anything that's non-public. There are no planned fire drills. I know we've already had one, but there are no more. That was the one, and it wasn't planned. So if you do hear the fire alarm, you do exactly what you did earlier this morning and leave as you did before. Access to the Wi-Fi, so you need to connect to the cloud. If it's your first time, you need to create an account on it. It's pretty simple. We do have a hashtag for the conference, which is Redux 2025. So if you are using any kind of social media, please do use the hashtag and post us in it. The toilets are outside, so they're all the same level as the coffee. So there's some to the left-hand side of this lecture theatre, and there's some additional ones around the corner next to the coffee bar. There's no smoking permitted on the premises, but there are smoking locations outside the main entrance. All sessions are going to be audio recorded and will be included on the ALPS YouTube channel. So if you could avoid making comments or criticisms about named individuals and keep things more generally, that would be great. Also, if you have any issues with that, please let us know. We have a photographer that's coming later on this afternoon and for the drinks reception. So again, if you have any concerns about your photograph being taken, please come and speak to somebody who's got a gold lanyard. So that's part of the OUP or the ALPS team. And yes, the OUP and ALPS team, like I said, gold lanyard. If you have any queries, questions, anything at all throughout the event, we're all very happy to help. So please just come and find us. So with that, I will hand over to Will Crook, who's the CEO of PLS, our platinum sponsor, and he is going to introduce our keynote speaker, Chris Leonard. Thank you.
Many thanks, and thank you very much for the promotion I've just been given. My name is Will Crook, and I'm the Head of Policy and Communications at PLS, and thankfully Tom West, our CEO, is not here today, but thank you nonetheless. Good morning, everybody, and on behalf of Publishers Licensing Services, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to the 2025 ALPS University Press Redux Conference, very kindly hosted by Oxford University Press. And I hope you'll find this year's Redux Conference as insightful, useful, and enjoyable as last year's Redux up in Edinburgh. Now, since joining PLS at the end of 2021, my work has been dominated by the emergence of artificial intelligence, and more specifically, its relationship with copyright. And we should be clear-eyed that AI presents various challenges to publishing, challenges to research integrity, challenges with ethics and detecting misuse, and challenges to making it fair and stopping the great copyright heist, as it's been termed, and the copyright infringement that has already taken place by unauthorized mass copying of publisher content for the training of AI models. However, we should also be equally as clear, AI does present opportunities. And it would be wrong to paint a wholly negative picture. There are opportunities to license, and you will hear more about that from PLS's Head of Rights and Licensing, Amy Ellis, tomorrow, about some of the work PLS is doing with partners to license content for AI. And there are opportunities to partner with ethical AI developers to provide the trusted, curated content you create and that their models need. And there are opportunities to use that technology to amplify the core strengths of university presses. Now, one key message that I and representatives from across publishing have been using to stakeholders in Westminster is that publishers are innovators too. The industry, indeed scholarly publishing, has played an important role in not just the development, but also the adoption of AI. And whilst there may be some debate as to the current ability of AI and the limits of its future potential, it is the case that the use of AI, and certainly generative AI, is increasing and the technology only likely to continue to improve. Now, statistics recently published by the Copyright Licensing Agency show that 63% of employees in private sector and 55% of public sector employees have used generative AI for work purposes. 78% of private sector employees and 74% of public sector employees expect to increase their usage of generative AI over the next year. And more importantly for PLS, and those of us in the rights and licensing world, 82% of UK professionals use third-party content, possibly the content you all create, in generative AI prompts. With this continuing economic uncertainty and pressures to improve productivity, and a government very keen to increase adoption of AI across the economy, for many organizations, it's a case of when and not if they begin to use AI. And perhaps the more relevant question is now how. And one thing is certain, publishers are well placed to benefit from this transformative technology. And in that vein of AI optimism, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage your opening keynote speaker. Someone who's worked in scholarly communication for over 25 years, has worked at Elsevier, Springer Nature, and Biomed Central, amongst others. Someone who is now at the forefront of the adoption of AI by scholarly publishers, and an expert in the challenges and opportunities that all of this may present. Someone who's written for the Scholarly Kitchen, a publication I'm sure everybody here subscribes to, and somehow finds time to run his own newsletter too, Scalene, that I can thoroughly recommend. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. That looks at how AI is affecting the peer review process. So to hear everything you need to know about AI, please welcome to the stage the Director of Strategy and Innovation at Cactus Communications, Chris Leonard.
Thank you, Will. Well, I hope I live up to that very impressive intro. Just before we start, and mainly for my interest more than anything else, we'll just do a little bit of arm stretching. And I'd like to ask everyone to raise their hands who would consider themselves a relatively frequent user of LLMs, so ChatGPT, Claude, things like that. If you use them fairly regularly, raise your hands. And thank you. And raise your hands again if you've used a new model in the last 2 months, let's say. Anyone used one of the newer models? Great. Anyone wish AI would simply go away? No one? Oh, okay. That's surprising. Oh, just one person. Lovely. Right. Let's start. So a little bit about me. I won't go into a lot of information about my long and illustrious career. You can just see some of the places I've worked here. Interestingly, I put a map on there so you could see. I originally came from Middlesbrough, and it was only when that happened I realised I'd moved progressively further away from there throughout my career. So I went to university in Leeds, then I came to Oxford, I got my first job in London, then I went to work for Elsevier in Amsterdam, then I went to work in Qatar. I eventually came back to England, but I'm now in the southwest, about as far away as you can get from Middlesbrough and still be in England. But it's a nice place, just you wouldn't guess so looking from my CV. So we're going to start with a little story. And the story here is about a little cat person. If you're of a certain age, you might recognize this as being the Napster logo. Now, in the very late 90s, early 2000s, the music industry was in a full-on panic. Napster and peer-to-peer file sharing had upended the music business model. Record stores were closing, CDs were even seen as relics, and artists feared their work would simply become free. So, when Spotify launched, critics also thought this would be another existential threat, a platform that would cannibalize album sales, underpay musicians, and strip music of its cultural weight. But over time, something unexpected happened. Spotify's algorithms, which many feared would homogenize the listener's taste, actually began to surface niche genres and indie artists to a global audience. Classical labels, once skeptical, found interested listeners for obscure composers in Sao Paulo and Seoul. Playlists like late night jazz or ambient study became a gateway to genres that physical record stores had never stocked. So the industry never collapsed, it actually expanded. And today, streaming is the main way that people engage with music. Yet it never erased the old world. It forced a reinvention. Vinyl sales have surged as an analog component to the convenience of online music. And artists now blend algorithmic savvy with artistic intent, creating playlist-friendly tracks alongside albums. So the fears of a soulless technology never really materialized. They gave way to an ecosystem where human creativity and machine intelligence coexist. This is what comedians call setting up a callback. So I will come back to this story at the end. Now, slightly different story. Does anyone know who this is? I'd be impressed if anyone did, even though his name is written up there. This guy is called Johannes Trithemius, everyone's favorite 15th century monk. So Johannes was born in Germany in 1462, which was 20 years after the invention of the printing press. But Johannes was not going to be swayed by this newfangled technology. He was a scribe, one of the monks whose job it was to copy out sacred texts by hand and quill. He argued that hand-copied manuscripts were sacred, irreplaceable artifacts imbued with the care and soul of their creators. He dismissed the newly invented printing press as a soulless machine, warning it would corrupt scholarship, devalue knowledge, and render scribes obsolete. I'm highlighting this quote here because I love his turn of phrase. Whoever makes such statements is trying to create a cloak of darkness for his own idleness. I will try to lever that into a conversation I have at some point. Yet, irony struck so hard, Alanis Morissette might have been impelled to write an extra verse, because what happened was Trithemius' own critique of the printing press was printed. I mean, you can see that on here. And what that meant was it was very widely disseminated. So the very technology he feared became the vehicle for his ideas to spread further than any scribe's quill could have carried them. The press, once viewed as a threat, ultimately democratized learning, fueled the Renaissance and the rise of universities. And as you can see, I got my copy of this from the internet. Amazing. So, fast forward to today. University presses find themselves at a similar crossroads. AI, like the printing press, is met with trepidation. Will it replace rigor, human judgment, undermine the value of scholarship? Yet Trithemius' story reminds us that disruption is not necessarily destruction. The scribe's craft evolved, merging with new tools to solve a greater purpose. So fear is natural when the future is unwritten. But history favors those who shape change rather than try to resist it. AI, when guided by the ethics and expertise of university presses, could be our era's printing press, a force to amplify knowledge, broaden access, and reimagine scholarship. The key lies not in clinging to the quill, but ensuring the machine serves the mind. Okay, so maybe a little bit early for that kind of syrupy optimism. But let's take a look at what's happening in real life with university presses today. And I'm highlighting some stories on here which have come out fairly recently, certainly in the last 6 months. And honestly, guys, how do you guys sleep? This is all bad news, right? And, yeah, sorry, I'm still going here. And if we add in a little AI into the mix, then I can start to feel anxiety levels and probably blood pressures rising. So the truth is, some of these underlying macroeconomic and geopolitical things are going to affect all publishers, and the disruption from AI is going to affect all aspects of life, never mind just university presses. So I'm going to show you some positivity in a moment, but the negative things aren't going to go away. In fact, they'll probably get worse. So, I made this into a nice inspirational slide, but you can hardly see it. It says, the negative things aren't going to go away. In fact, they'll get more challenging. It had a nice black background earlier. So, where are we now? So, this is... this isn't anything. There we go. So the reason I asked if anyone's tried a new AI model in the last few months is because the last 2 months have seen unbelievable rate of change and progress with what AI can do. If you have a look at this graphical abstract, I created it with the latest Chat GPT model with generative image processing. And this was a week and a half ago. Now, if you look at it, you can see some problems with it. So I simply posted in an abstract showing that with microplastics at sea, there's a lot of missing microplastic on the surface, and we only have the meso and the macroplastic floating on the surface, with the assumption that the rest of it is kind of sunk down into the ecosystems below. So it created this graphical abstract. Now, all of the numerical facts are correct. There's a couple of problems with it. You can see the year was 2007 to 2013, so it missed a 2, and you can see that one of the hotspots for floating plastic seems to be over a landmass. However, when you compare it to what it did with a model a month before, you can see that it's awful. You can see all the nonsense words, repetition, and the general alienness of it all. So if that happens with just one iteration of improvement in the model, imagine where we'll be in a year's time. Do you think these minor issues will be solved? Because I'm almost certain they will be. And then we'll be able to make graphical abstracts out of a text abstract virtually instantaneously. Now, similarly for peer review, now I know this is a very sensitive area, and I know human peer review is the gold standard, if you can find the good reviewers, that is, and they agree to review and they return the reviews on time. But human peer reviews are not scaling without output, and the good ones certainly don't. Now, if you used a LLM to generate a peer review report 3 months ago, you'd had a very different experience to the one you have nowadays. It would have been fairly vague, fairly generic, and would have only considered the manuscript on its own. Now, if you know what to do, you can get super granular examination of a paper with specific recommendations for the authors on how to improve it. So again, considering where we were 3 months ago, if you want to extrapolate this forward a year, do you think it's feasible that AI might be able to match the average human reviewer? Maybe not the best ones, but the average ones. I think so. And it's important to note that these reviews are generated in the time it would normally take you to invite a single reviewer. So time is also an issue here. So how can university presses adapt in the AI age? So I spent a little bit of time in these last few weeks speaking to various senior people in various university presses throughout the country and in North America, in fact. And I was pleasantly surprised to find some of them are already using AI in relatively low-risk ways. So I've compiled a little list here, which I'll go through in a second. But one of the more interesting things that I learned was some university presses are grasping the AI nettle by the hands. That's not a very good metaphor. Are trying to take control of their own attitudes towards AI. And they've kind of declared internal task forces where they would say, yes, it's fine to use AI in this instance, or no, we don't ever want to use AI in this instance. And having that clarity in-house about not only what you want to do, but also what you don't want to do is actually an excellent first step. So, it does say press on the end of there, I promise you. So these are some of the ways that some university presses are already using AI. I won't read through them all. Some of them you probably recognize, think, oh yeah, that's a good thing because we also do that. And others you think, oh yeah, I never thought about that. That would be a good thing for us to do. What I would say, maybe with the exception of research integrity checks, is they all feel low to moderate risk. Nobody's saying here that they want to use AI to do peer reviewing or create graphical abstracts right now. But these are areas where traditional existing LLMs are excellent. Blurbs and social media posts in particular. And that's fine, right? But we are possibly more interested in what's going to happen next. What happens after you've done a LinkedIn post optimized by ChatGPT? What's the future of AI and university presses? So in order to examine that question, we could look at another academic research institute, the National Library of Medicine in the US, and there's an excellent paper actually in Oxford University Press Journal recently, looking at how the NLM could evolve in an era of AI. And I commend this article strongly to anyone who's here. But I've just pulled out this quote here. So it says, the NLM NLM, sorry, I've got LLMs on the brain. The NLM can rise to new challenges by looking at these three paths. To become an authentication authority, to become an observatory of the state of human health science, and to become a hub for culturally appropriate bespoke translation, transformation, and summarization for different users. Now, the reason I'm kind of excited about this is the NLM is sticking to its core values and its core mission, but it's opening up new ways to explore those that AI has opened up for them. So my message is it's probably time to reimagine what your press stands for. You probably already are thinking about this anyway, but how will AI help achieve your core mission? Maybe the process of producing academic research artifacts in the form of articles and monographs will only be a small part of the mix in the future. And if your press exists to disseminate scholarly knowledge, uphold rigor, preserve culture, based on editorial excellence, niche and local expertise, that may not necessarily have to rely on books and journals. So, AI can help publishing, but publishers can also help with the shortcomings of AI. How can university presses ensure AI serves the public good? That's a hard question, so I did what I do whenever I get a hard question, and I asked someone else. So I asked a deep-seek question of that, and it came up with 5 answers which I think are actually worthy of exploration. So one of the problems that AI has right now, it's full of hallucinations, factual integrity, a very Trumpian phrase, and AI slop. So we know AI often generates plausible sounding falsehoods. How could university presses certify facts and develop truth labels for AI outputs to signal reliability? AI, in its responses, often flattens nuance, stripping knowledge of its cultural, historical, and disciplinary context. So, is it worth considering an AI training corpora that preserves niche, local, or marginalized perspectives? Is it worth looking at AI tools that flag oversimplification of responses? Ephemeral knowledge, AI prioritizes recent and trending data, risking the loss of slow scholarship and long-term knowledge. Is it possible to think of university presses building living repositories of replicable research to train AI on these durable insights? And could we also advocate for slow AI frameworks where this legacy content and longitudinal analysis holds the appropriate sway within the AI responses? I think we all know when you look at the output from an LLM, you need to have your critical thinking hat on. This isn't necessarily what everyone does, and it would be good if AI interfaces that could invite interrogation, so we could show conflicting evidence, or why does this source matter? And think about what a counter-AI edition of a book would look like that models critical analysis for educators and readers. And obviously, AI also entrenches power in big tech, often sidelining academic and public interests. What about a non-profit AI model trained on university press content, creating ethical frameworks for AI partnerships which require transparency in the corporate use of scholarly data? Not bad for 30 seconds work. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is if we want to look at the medium to longer term future, it's important to find your ikigai. Yes, I am extremely happy with that. And that's the intersection of the core values of your press, AI and society. So how is AI helping society, and also what new problems is it causing? There's a world at large out there where certain negative things seem to be trending. And then a lot of university presses exist to serve their local environment, whether that be researchers, the university, your city, or your region. So what I'm suggesting is we should reimagine not just what publishing is, but what it could become. Your press isn't just a curator of books or journals, it's a guardian of truth, a steward of culture, and an architect of understanding. What does the world need from you right now? Well, your mission, rigor, curation, focus, preservation, that hasn't altered, but the tools to fulfill it have. We shouldn't view AI necessarily as a threat to scholarship. Indeed, AI's limitations could be your mandate. When models hallucinate, your editorial standards anchor them. When shallow content floods public discourse, your curation creates depth. And when AI commoditizes information, you can counter it with critique and provenance. Again, this isn't about replacing books or journals. It's about evolving how knowledge lives in the world. Could AI-driven tools extend your press's reach into simulations, a dynamic data set, collaborative peer review? Could you train models on the backlists that you have to safeguard the cultural nuance often erased by generic AI? So the goal isn't to chase innovation for its own sake, but to ensure that as AI reshapes how we consume knowledge, presses remain the stewards of how we understand it. So the challenge is clear, I hope. We don't need to adopt AI, we need to shape it. It needs to be equipped with your expertise and insist that it reflects your values. And to prove once again that rigor isn't old-fashioned, it's essential. So let's not ask just how AI can serve publishing, but how publishing can serve the world with the help of AI. The page is turning, and the next chapter will be written by us. Thank you very much.
Very good, Chris. Thank you very much. Now we're going to have a bit of a Q&A. And I'm just going to, I think it's the chair's prerogative, I get to ask the first question. So do think of some questions. I think we've got some roaming mics and we've got some input on the app too. But Chris, from PLS, I think a question about licensing first and licensing to AI. I mean, I think from the conversations I've had with publishers broadly, there's enthusiasm, a certain enthusiasm mixed with a bit of trepidation about licensing to AI, be that directly or collectively. I just wondered whether you had any thoughts, perhaps any advice for those publishers in the room who were thinking about it or in that process of licensing their content to AI.
Sure. Well, I can reflect back on the conversations that I've had with others, maybe. So the idea of licensing your content to a Google or OpenAI or something like that is possibly a conversation you're having or have already had. Some pressers have decided no, they simply won't do it. Others have decided yes, they will, provided their authors are on board and will opt in to this. Others have said yes, and for sensible financial reasons have said yes, I would say. Now, a lot of the reasons against cooperating with these large LLMs, I have sympathy with. What I would say is, if we imagine people are gradually switching from searching a search engine to asking a LLM questions, if you're not a part of that LLM corpus, you're not going to be able to help shape the answers. So that's one thing. Another thing is around copyright. So a lot of publishers are very hesitant to sign copyrighted content over. One fairly simple way around that would be to create summaries of existing work. And again, ironically, this is something LLM could help with. Create summaries of existing work and license those summaries to the LLM companies instead. So there's not universal love for the idea of licensing. I think you should consider what the long-term implications are of not being involved there. And if it's around copyright primarily, then consider making summarized versions of them, but simply not being a part of those future conversations, I would say, is possibly going to be an issue in the long term.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, we'll turn it to the room. If anybody has a question, we have a gentleman right at the back, please.
The most awkward spot.
Following on from that point, it's Ross Mounts from Arcadia here. I'd like to discuss the Wikimedia enterprise model, where you don't necessarily need to license your content, but to have access to large-scale access through an API, service-level agreements, high throughput. That's one model that I think university presses should explore, banding together to provide a surface for big tech to use their content, but also pay for using their content without necessarily relying on licensing. So I just thought I'd throw that into the mix,
Yeah,
because I think
great.
it's a really good idea.
No, that's a very good point.
Thank you. That, Chris, I mean, do you think any publishers will go for that?
We have a whole room of them here. We could ask them. But, yeah, I can see, I mean, the private conversations that are happening between the likes of a Google and a university press are astonishing to my ears. The amount of money they're happy to pay for a one-off licensing deal. And if you're in a precarious financial state, or you think revenues are falling for the next kind of 3 years, it would be very tempting just to say, yes, let's sign up to this. We can use that revenue for the next 3 years to grow and expand, maybe in some of the ways we highlighted here. I think if you were able to, if the Wikimedia Foundation were able to offer some kind of revenue in return for that, then yeah, absolutely, it should be of interest, I think.
Thank you.
Excellent. Do you have any other questions from in the room? Deborah, over here, please. Oh.
Deborah Dixon from Oxford University Press. Chris, I was interested in your comments on, you gave us a challenge. Let's shape AI rather than adapt to AI. And that may mean moving away from traditional products like books and journals. And on the journal side, I can see very clearly how AI can really help to search the evidence base and come up with answers much more quickly than we've ever done before. But don't we need to continue to feed the hopper? So we need to continue to feed that research information in so that AI can draw from it? Or are you suggesting that that information will be in a completely different way to what we know as journal articles?
I think we've been looking at the death of the academic article for about 100 years. I don't think I'm necessarily suggesting that. I can imagine it, if you look in the software world, where you have things like a GitHub model where you have a grid which shows the frequency of your activity and the intensity of your activity. You could imagine a repository where you can upload kind of micro publications every few days to build up a corpus of knowledge which you share with others. That seems to make sense logically, but I've been in this business long enough to know logical things don't always happen. So I'm not necessarily suggesting the death of the article or a book either. I mean, you're right, we still need input, we still need new data. You hear a lot of these larger LLMs saying, we've run out of data. I mean, university presses create curated content, trusted content, which should be extremely valuable for these LLMs. So I'm not suggesting we stop. I'm not even suggesting we change format, even though that would seem to make sense. I'm just suggesting that the outputs, if we want them to be used beyond how they're used now, we may need to consider how that content is made available to users. So through a PDF in a subscription journal will reach some people. Through PDF and HTML in an open access journal, it will reach some more people. If it's a part of an LLM model, potentially it could reach many more people. So it's just evolving how we think about how to disseminate the research rather than how we create it. That's a separate conversation for a separate day. But I don't think we're going to be altering how we create articles that radically in the next few years.
Thank you.
Excellent. I'm just going to check in. Do we have any questions? No, so we'll throw it back out to the room. There's a lady at the front, please.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Sarah Phibbs from STM and Research for Life. So I wanted to ask about what you've learned about translation capabilities, given that we are all providing content to lower middle income countries through Research for Life, and how we might then really stimulate that global knowledge exchange, which is really what we're wanting to do.
Yeah, I think I might have had translations on my list there. Translations is another area where the progress is almost exponential. So in my day job, one of the things I'm responsible for is repurposing of content in various different ways. One of those ways is creating plain language summaries and translations of those plain language summaries. So translation technology, I would say a year ago, was quite good, but not great, to the extent of, we were able to reliably translate plain language summaries 85% of the time into 5 set languages that we always do, which is Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, not Korean, Arabic, Spanish, and Portuguese. Had real trouble with Korean. Now, in the last 12 months, the technology has moved on to such an extent that we no longer even send the output to be QC'd. It's just perfect. As close to perfect as you can get. And with Arabic translations, you always have nuances around a dialect and things like that. But Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, they're pretty close to being perfect. Now, that's a technology which varies between providers. So some providers are excellent in these languages and some other providers are excellent in these languages. So you have to find out which ones are good for you. Or you can ask me and I'll tell you. But yeah, that's an avenue which has opened up, I would say, in the last year, where you could, as long as you don't put anything too taxing into it, a high-energy physics paper might not come out as well as a plain language summary or an abstract, but plain language summaries and abstracts, you can create versions in pretty much any language now at a level where they will certainly be understood by a native speaker. So that really opens up the world then to how you could spread the content from your journals and books.
Excellent. Now, I think we've only got a few minutes left. Chris, is there any kind of final thoughts that you have about your presentation, some of the questions you have, maybe things you would kind of have not mentioned this morning that you would kind of like to say before we finish?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to keep this optimistic and end on a high note. So I'm not going to mention any of the things that I haven't mentioned on purpose. I think some of the following sessions will probably cover that anyway, around things like research integrity. But yeah, what I would say is, again, what I said in the presentation, reimagine how you can address your core mission. A journal, a book, for sure. They'll be a part of the mix for a long time to come. But there are also going to have to be other ways. There They're going to have to be translations, they're going to have to be summaries, you're going to have to think about what your LLM strategy is. How do you get your content to surface when somebody asks a question in Claude or a DeepSeek? I would say it feels like, I hate this term, but it does feel like a kind of inflection point. The next 5 years are going to be radically different to the last 5 years. And you need to start thinking outside the box, yes. Start thinking more critically about how you and your press's values are reflected in LLMs, in the world at large. And I think if you think about broadening the conversation, opening up new audiences, this could be a fantastic opportunity. And I think I'll just leave it there. All the other things will be covered afterwards today. But for now, I think we stand on a precipice where we need to have the faith to jump off it and start flapping our wings.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now, we're going to go straight in, I think, into the first plenary. I think Rodri Jackson's going to jump up on stage and take over and talk about open access. But I think before he does, I just want everybody to give Chris a huge round of applause for a great speech. Thank you. Very good. Well done.